Okay, so I was trying to demonstrate the installation process for Visual Studio, and I had to reboot and I lost the video. So I'm going to go back through sort of quickly, try to get the key points. When you go to Visual Studio's website, and that's visualstudio.microsoft.com, you get this screen that says Visual Studio IDE over here on the left. If you hover over Download Visual Studio, you select Community 2019, and you get this busy looking screen. But at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice Windows 7 provides what do you want to do with this. I'm going to quickly get the run just so that you see. You get this user account control thing. Click yes. And then in a minute it should pop up. There it is, Video Studio Installer. And by the way, you can minimize that window. In fact, I think you can probably just close that window at that particular point. Just click Continue, and it downloads and installs that installer. Not a big deal. Now, I already have this installed, so it's re-downloading this, but it's no big deal. Modify. Yeah, okay. So this is the screen that normally comes up at this particular point. And the only thing that you need to check is this .NET desktop development. It includes C#, Visual Basic, and F#. If you already have Visual Studio 2017 installed, you needn't go through this entire process of installing 2019. In fact, you may not want to, because this version 2019 runs a little bit slower on older machines, and so unless you have a newer machine, this could be a bit slow. Unfortunately, if you go to Visual Studio, if you haven't installed it before, if you go to Visual Studio's website to download, this is the only version. The first time you run it, it's going to take forever. And I mean, plan on getting a coffee because it's going to take a while. Okay, so once you have it installed there, it's going to take you to a screen where it shows you the status of its installation. It's going to give you the option of doing the installation while downloading down here in the corner, or the other option is to install additional things. Like for instance, if I added something, you'll see that it'll change this to modify. It will say install the first time, and so you can do it either way. Generally speaking, I recommend clicking install, and then it will do a full download first and then install the parts. That works better in general. Now, when it comes up the first time, it's going to ask you for your Microsoft account name, and if you are signed in to Windows 10 under a Microsoft account, it will just automatically use that account name. If you want, you can also sign in under the school's account name and put in the password, and it will use that as well. It doesn't matter which Microsoft account that you use, it will make use of all of those. Now, if you're taking Visual Basic as your first course, you can also keep this installed, and the .NET 1, .NET 2, which uses C#, will also use the same compiler with the same things already installed at the end of this. Once you have brought it up the very first time, it will be up here. Click on Visual Studio 2019. You'll get this silly splash screen, which the very first time I ran it, it took forever to get away. If you've had things open, then these particular things will show up here. If you're creating a new project, click that. Now you have to choose the language, and that particular language in this case is Visual Basic all the way here at the bottom. And then we will be doing Windows Form Applications. Sometimes we just refer to it as WFA. A Windows Form app is what Windows programs normally look like. Okay, so you click that, then you click Next. Here you type a project name. Now inside of the course, you'll probably be doing something like WK1 for week 1, and then T1 or T2 or whatever for task 1, task 2, and then your name, last name. Try to keep it short because Windows has a limit of characters for its directory project length and all that jazz. Now, the default directory for location is this, where it says username and then it says source/repos, and that's not easy to dig through to find by default. So I always change this to user desktop, which is easy enough where if you select this, you can just go over here and click on desktop, select folder, and it fills in all the other bits. So all you're really doing is selecting desktop. And the solution name will match with the project name. You can go ahead and put in this check mark, which places the solution name, which is this, inside of the project in the same directory, and it will simplify your life a bit. This don't mess with. It just makes sure that the latest .NET framework is done. Then click Create. It starts to create a folder for that, and you can see it, well, you could see it over there. Over here on my desktop with Lara Croft here. Okay, so now I have the toolbox. The toolbox is normally over here, and there's the toolbox here. Yours, it may be in a different spot over here, but it will be there. Now, the first thing I do is go up here. There's a little bitty thumbtack. Click it, and it will keep it on this every time you start a new project so that you don't have to move the form around and all of that jazz. Okay, so that's something which I want you to keep in mind. Now I'm going to create a Hello World program just so you can see it, but you'll be seeing it again shortly. Now, if I drag a label onto here and a button. Now, a label is kind of just an output thing whenever you want to show information. And a button is an action device, that is, you click it with the mouse and something happens as a result of that. Now the label, and one of the other things over here at properties, I usually click this A to Z thing here because it makes these things always be in alphabetical order, makes it easier to, Now, so you can see what it is rather than not being able to see. I'm going to put a few X's. You don't have to do that, all right? You can blank it out completely and that's fine and probably common. Now this is named label 1. Note that this starts off with a capital letter. I used to use a different syntax where we used LBL, so some of you who took me in other courses probably noticed that. But in actuality, Microsoft changed its policies, so the compiler will give you all kinds of minor warnings and so forth. So I'm just going to call this label, I'm going to call it job done. And then I'm going to go to the button, click it once, and then I'm going to go here and you can see it's called button 1, and I'm going to call it button job done. And I don't want the button named button 1, so I'm going to call it do the job. And as soon as I press enter, notice up here in this button it says do the job. Now if I double click this button, it describes the code where I'm going to do something. And so in label job done, which shows up over here in this box, if I double click that and then press the dot, which indicates what action are we going to take, we're going to assign text here, and I can type in just TE, press enter, and then say equals, and then I can type in the text. And I'm going to type in good job. Okay, now there's no syntax like there is in C#, so those of us that have done C# courses, any student is used to putting a semicolon on the back. Yeah, that doesn't happen here in Visual Basic. Okay, now I can click Start. It will go through, it will compile. Okay, and so you can see do the job, and when I click it with the mouse, it will say good job. Okay, so that's all this is designed to do, and that's all we want this particular program to specify.